a tutorial that illustrates the single PSD method for making buttons for your rollover states in Photoshop. First of all, when you open up Photoshop, you want to start with a new file and you want to set up the width and height of that file and the resolution. The resolution should be 72. And I'm going to change the width and height to pixels so I can consider exactly how big of an image I want to make. And you can adjust this, but consider 72 pixels per inch. So maybe I want a button that's 100 pixels wide, a little bit like an inch and a half, and 30 pixels high. So we'll take a look and see what that looks like. We could have picked the background color at that point, but that's something we can also go ahead and change. So you can see we have a nice sort of smallish square button here that we're going to use. And we also need to have our layers, which I have way over here to the right. I'll bring them in so that we can take a look at what's actually happening here. The key to this whole process is the layers. Before I go any further, I'm going to save this as, in the PSD version, as buttons, because all my buttons are going to come out of this one PSD. Now, if I haven't already figured out a place where I'm saving things, I'm going to make a folder, and I'm just going to call this web and put it on my desktop for now, because this is just where I'm going to be saving everything in this folder. This as well as everything I export from Photoshop. So if I wanted to change the background color, it's very simple to do. I can take the bucket and I can change the color that I want to use in the bucket. And maybe I want to use something more in the green family, sort of a khaki-ish, greenish color. And I'll use the bucket, which if you can't find the bucket, it's often hidden under the gradient tool. Just hold down on it and select the bucket. And I'll dump that color in the background, and you can see the background color changing on the layers. Now I want to type some text, so I'm going to click on the text tool, and when the text tool comes up, I can actually change the color of what text it's going to type. So I'm going to change this to like a darker black type color. And I'll start typing. I usually like to start with the longest word. So if I know that I'm going to have, say in this case, 3 buttons, home, links, and contact. Contact is the longest word. We don't want to start with a short word and then end up not having enough space for the rest of our words. So we'll go with contact. That looks kind of small. So I can come up here in the options and I can change and adjust the size if I want to. That's a little too big. So I'll make it like 22. And I can use the arrow to move it around. I can also use the arrow keys on the keyboard to sort of bump it around to make sure I have enough room and I have it positioned properly on the background. And you know, there are other things that you can do with the text, like change the typography and things like that. I'm not going to do that right now. So now that we have the type tool layer created, we can actually select that, and if you make sure that you're on that layer, you can move it around. Notice that Photoshop made the individual text layer for you when you started typing. You didn't have to make that layer. When you make buttons, you can also include layers, add layers with this button here that have little graphics or icons or things like that. You can do anything you want to add to your buttons to make them more interesting. We're just focusing on text right now. So now what we want to do is have a rollover state for this, and we want to use the text that we have and just apply an effect, and that's this little add a layer style button down here at the bottom of the layers panel. And I want to add a color overlay. And so it comes up and it sort of defaults to red, but we can change that to any color we want. Maybe when we roll over it, we want it to be something more like white. So we change it to white, and now notice we have an effect of a color overlay, and we can use these little eyeballs. They're called visibility icons. And if we turn off one of the eyeballs, we still have the black. So we could save that as contact.gif for our contact button, and we can save this as contact_roll.gif for the rollover state for the contact button. So that's very simple to do. Now if we want to make the second button, we've got one that we want to sort of use as a template. If you come up here to the options palette in the layer panel, move this over so you can see what happens. You can duplicate that layer, and it allows you to change the name of it. So we'll do our home button now. This is just the name. We have a new layer called home. So if I turn off the contact layer, I can use the text tool to highlight the word that's now in the home layer, change that to say home, and now I have a home button that's black and white. And I still have my contact button that's black and white. And we'll do one more. I'll duplicate the layer, move it over, and we'll call it links. So we have a links layer. We'll turn off our other two layers so we can just change the text on the links layer. And we have links that has an effect of white and without. So very simple. Now we just organize the eyeballs to have each layer in the state that we want it. So if we want to start with the home button, I'll click that and I'll turn off the effect. And this is what's going to be our home.gif button. So under File, I want to save each one of these out individually by using the Save for Web and Devices feature. When it comes up, make sure it's in this for up method. And I like it to look at that so I can kind of compare. The one that's selected has the blue around it. And in this case, I want to change this to a GIF, not a JPEG, because this is a graphic. And I want to make sure it's got all the colors in it that it needs. And I just say Save, and I can save this as home.gif. Let's make sure we put it in this web folder on the desktop. So I'll save that, and we'll change the eyeball to be on, do a Save for Web, and now the settings are set, so we can just go quickly through this and call this one Home Roll because it's going to be our over state. And we'll turn off Home, and we'll do Links. And we have the links without the effect, so that will be links.gif. And we want links with the overlay to be links roll.gif. And then finally, we'll do the contact button without the overlay, contact.gif, and with the overlay, contact roll.gif. So now we have 3 buttons, each with 2 states. If we wanted to look on the desktop at the web folder that was created, we can see them all created in here, all 6 versions plus the PSD. And then you'll be able to use those buttons when you insert rollover images into Dreamweaver. It's just that simple. Just make sure that you keep everything in the same location, keep in the same typography, and you'll have very consistent looking buttons.